Hi there movie lovers, welcome back to our usual appointment in which we let you discover all the details of the lives of your favourite stars in the film industry. What do they do before worldwide fame? What are their big or little known future projects? And what are the most curious facts about their fantastic career? If you want to be the first to get to know all the latest information about trailers, films, series, actors and much more, make sure to subscribe to FilmIsNow and to tap the notification bell. This way you'll be kept up to date across all your devices. Today we are speaking about an actor who has been on the scene for decades, making some of our best childhood memories as well as starring in the biggest blockbusters. Today it's all about Tom Hanks. Thomas Jeffrey Hanks was born in 1956 in what was the very small town of Concord in California. But instead of settling there with his family, he spent most of his childhood being shuffled between various homes. As a matter of fact, after his parents divorced when he was just 5 years old, the family basically split in half. Little Tom left for Nevada with his father and older siblings, leaving his younger brother behind with their mother. Although nowadays Hanks is one of the biggest grossing actors on the scene, his childhood was far from wealthy, as his family settled in a basement flat, a small space shared between 10 people, as his father remarried a woman with other 5 children of her own. If young Tom's situation wasn't chaotic enough, him and his brothers were then shuffled to and from various relatives' houses while their father established a residence. Because of the uncertainty of the circumstances, the little Hanks children soon learned to make the best of the situation by themselves, even doing housework such as preparing meals on their own and doing their own laundry. Throughout these younger years, Tom developed a strong interest which later on became one of his biggest passions and theme of some of his works. As a matter of fact, he had a strong fascination for space and he dreamt of becoming an astronaut. He knew the names of the crews, wouldn't miss a launch, and would even put bricks in his trunks and go to the bottom of swimming pools breathing out of a garden hose while he pretended to fix bolts on an imaginary spaceship.
This is Houston. Say again, please?
Houston, we have a problem.
Regardless of the chaotic housing situation, Tom Hanks still managed to thoroughly enjoy his childhood and took judo classes, played baseball and went camping with the family. As a matter of fact, the whole unpredictability of the situation made him learn to be flexible and resilient, a feature that stuck with him way beyond his childhood. And regardless of his worries, by high school he was excelling in his classes with above average grades. When he entered high school in the 70s, he found an emotional anchor in the First Covenant Church in Oakland and eventually moved in with a family from the church, while he worked as a bellhop at one of the famous Hilton hotels, where he recalls carrying luggage for all the biggest stars at the time, even for Cher. Although Hanks describes his school years as a time he spent behaving as a, quote, horribly, painfully, terribly shy kid, his friends encouraged him to take part in drama classes. He eventually fell in love with acting and participated in many plays, ultimately even praising his drama teacher for his help and encouragement during his Oscar speech many years later in 1994. His love for theatre continued after his graduation from high school, as he kept on appearing on stage and working as a stagehand along with taking acting classes. And when he enrolled in college, he kept theatre as his extracurricular activity. During his time in college, Hanks met another aspiring actress, Susan Dillingham, who went by the stage name of Samantha Lewis. The two quickly fell in love and were married by the next year, along with the birth of their first son Colin, with their daughter Elizabeth arriving just a couple of years later. As Hanks' love for theatre slowly took over his studies, he decided to leave college altogether. His one and only passion was acting, and to begin professionally performing, he moved to New York City, where, unfortunately, at first, his career was far from successful. He only had very small roles in little-known films, for example, He Knows You're Alone, a B-tier horror movie about a bride stalker who haunts a woman just before her wedding. But soon after, Hanks received wider fame in the weekly comedy series BOSOM Buddies, in which he would dress up as a woman in order to afford a woman's-only apartment. Although the series was a smaller project, Hanks gave it all he could, even frequently improvising his lines, and it eventually gave him both the career and confidence boost he needed. As a matter of fact, he moved to Los Angeles, and a couple of years later he was already working alongside huge director Ron Howard in Splash, a PG love story about a man who falls in love with a mermaid. Apparently after a one-shot guest appearance on Happy Days, Ron Howard asked Hanks to try out for a secondary figure in the film, but he liked him so much that he gave him the lead role. As by then Hanks had secured his appeal as a comedic actor, during the early 80s he was offered roles in various smaller productions, such as Nothing in Common, which he later described as one of the films which really fueled his desire to work in the film industry. A few years later, in 1988, he captivated a huge audience with Big, in which he plays a 12-year-old boy stuck in an adult's body. As Hanks prepared for his roles through method acting, fully immersing himself into the world of his character, he spent most of the time preparing himself by mimicking the expressions of his teenage co-star, in order to achieve the best childlike mannerisms. He further carried out this method acting, for example in his next role as a stand-up comedian in the comedy film Punchline, for which he practiced by actually doing stand-up comedy gigs in real clubs. During this time, Hanks and his college sweetheart Samantha Lewis divorced, and he was very fearful of entering a succession of unstable relationships, even going to therapy to tackle this concern. But he eventually met and fell in love with Rita Wilson, a colleague of his on various film sets and his partner still to date. Hanks took time off of his acting career and even decided to convert to his future wife's faith, as she was a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, and their love was so strong that by the end of the 80s the two were married, and just a couple of years later their first son Chester was born. Hanks only returned to acting in the 90s, with an extra £30 on, as he had to play an alcoholic baseball coach in a league of their own. He later credited a local ice cream shop for helping him get into the right shape for the film. But he soon had to lose all that weight for his next and at the time very controversial role as an AIDS patient in the award-winning drama Philadelphia. Back at the time, the spread of HIV was relatively recent, and Philadelphia was one of the first mainstream films to acknowledge the issue of HIV and openly speak about homosexuality and homophobia. The film opens with Bruce Springsteen's famous piece, Streets of Philadelphia. Springsteen is a close friend of Hanks, and he prepared the song just for the film, eventually even winning an Oscar for Best Original Song, along with 4 Grammys and many more awards. The film was so touching that Hanks also won an Oscar for Best Actor. But his success didn't stop there, as he also won the same award the following year, for what is probably his most famous role ever: Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is a man from Alabama who lives a life full of various occurrences, but all of which unwillingly influence different important events, ultimately affecting many famous moments of the 20th century. Although Forrest Gump is a family favourite, back at the time Hanks took a risk by not being paid up front, but trusting the film and only taking a percentage of the movie's gross. And that definitely worked out. These were the years of Hanks' highest success on a personal level, also with the birth of his son Truman Theodore, and on a professional one with some of his biggest performances. In 1995, he even managed to combine his personal passions with his profession, as he was able to put in act his immense love for space travel by starring in Apollo 13, based on a real-life lunar mission. Director Ron Howard was absolutely taken aback by Hanks' immense knowledge on the subject, and Hanks personally described himself as being the most annoying person around, because he kept on cross-checking details and making sure every aspect was true to life. Apollo 13 went on to becoming one of the most loved space movies, and Hanks' love for space was later crowned by receiving the Douglas Morrow Public Outreach Award from the Space Foundation, given to anybody who contributes to public awareness about space programs, and he is also part of the National Space Society. Not only, NASA later discovered an asteroid and named it 12818 Tom Hanks in his honour. If 1995 wasn't a big enough year for Hanks, he also voiced Sheriff Woody in the timeless film Toy Story, a magical plot of toys that come to life whenever children aren't watching, and it became one of the most successful animated films of all time, generating a franchise lasting 20 years. It was one success after the other for Hanks, who by then was also considered the good guy in the industry, getting along with all his co-workers and not having any scandalous gossips surrounding him. He was able to enchant audiences with his versatility in all genres. So after playing an astronaut and an animated toy sheriff, at the end of the 90s he starred in Steven Spielberg's epic war film Saving Private Ryan, and the same year he was in the romantic comedy You've Got Mail, while the following year he was a police officer patrolling the death row in the film adaptation of the master of terror Stephen King's The Green Mile. If his roles weren't varied enough, after gaining £30 to portray one character, losing them right after for another, then getting back in shape, Hanks once again changed his appearance by losing a staggering £55 for his role as a man stranded on a desert island in Castaway. His weight fluctuations eventually influenced his overall health, and many years later he revealed he had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and that his extreme diet changes could have influenced it, although he says he absolutely refuses to tell other actors to do or not to do like him. Nothing ever stopped Tom Hanks from delivering the best performances he could convey, even if this meant that shooting overseas would make him receive emergency treatment for serious staph infection in his leg, or if it meant dislocating his shoulder by falling through a rotting floor in a building in Germany while scouting locations with Steven Spielberg for the series Band of Brothers. But this active side of his is then balanced by some of his quieter passions. As a matter of fact, Hanks practices transcendental meditation, and he is also a vintage typewriter enthusiast, having collected over 250 different and rare typewriters. He uses them almost daily, and to spread his passion to the world, a few years back he even released an app called Hanks Writer, meant to emulate the experience of using a typewriter. Within days, he had reached #1 on the App Store. The turn of the century, or to better say, millennium, gave us even more huge hits, as Hanks worked with world-famous director Sam Mendes in Road to Perdition, and after that, he was side by side with young Leonardo DiCaprio in the true cat-and-mouse story of a con artist and the FBI agent on his tail in Catch Me If You Can. The presence of Hanks in many successful films could also lie in the way he decides whether to take on a role or not, stating, "It can't be just another movie for me. It has to get me going somehow. There has to be some all-encompassing desire or feeling about wanting to do that particular movie." As a matter of fact, over the course of the years, he even turned down roles in huge productions such as Groundhog Day, The Shawshank Redemption, Jerry Maguire, and When Harry Met Sally. But the films in which he eventually starred are countless. But just to mention some, in the 2000s he starred in various critically acclaimed movies such as the award-showered thriller Captain Phillips and the historical drama Bridge of Spies, or in huge audience pleasers such as blockbuster hit The Da Vinci Code and its sequels. Topping everything was his beautiful performance as beloved Fred Rogers in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. So he has never been shy of portraying a variety of characters and in all genres. He even starred in the music video for pop star Kylie Rae Jepsen's hit I Really Like You, which gathered over 250 million views on YouTube alone. He is so pleasant with his fans that he's frequently referred to as America's dad, and he is so loved around the world that some countries such as Greece have even granted him honorary citizenship. And if he wasn't a good guy enough, even in the midst of all his busy filming schedule, he still finds time to actively support environmental causes and same-sex marriage, a cause for which at one point he and others raised over $40 million. At the moment, it is reported he is in talks to take on the role of Geppetto in Disney's live-action remake of Pinocchio, and we really can't see anyone else fitting better in that role. And now we are most curious of knowing, what is your favourite film starring Tom Hanks? Let us know with a comment down below. Also remember, if you want to be the first to get all the latest updates regarding the world of cinema and series, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to tap the notification bell. And if you want to show the world your love for the big and little screen, why don't you take a look at our film and series inspired merch? Get yourself a cozy hoodie or an awesome t-shirt by checking the link right below this video.